I always tell the people are like, they'll ask me my Hawaiian middle name is Kaimi Ikapono, and people will be like, "How do you say that?" And I'm like, "Well, you just sound it out. A E O U. You figure it
Yep.
out." Heck yeah, man. Well, I appreciate you being here. I appreciate. I really love your podcast, man. The Village Made podcast is wonderful.
Thank you.
Yeah, dude, it's stellar. All the guests you have on are like they're a lot of fun. In fact, I've been listening to them for like the past 2 weeks, man. I just been like binging. But I listened to one of the episodes with Lala, and he was
Oh yeah.
talking about the picture that he saw that someone shared on Twitter, and it was part of it was the same picture that he had on his wall. And so they had a cool connection there, and I was like, oh, you know what? I've never posted anything about my ancestors or anything like that, and so I thought it'd be really cool to try it, and it is a lot of fun, man. You inspired me to look up a lot of cool things.
Nice. Hey, that's cool. Yeah.
So yeah, thank you. So what made you start the Village Made podcast? What made you want to go into interviewing specifically, to tell the Polynesian story, which is why I was attracted to it. What made you? What was the thought process behind that, and how long have you been doing it?
So I've been posting for about a year now, maybe a little over a year. But before that, what people don't see, so that was just like the finished product, I guess, is what you would call like what I've been posting on YouTube the past year. But
Hmm.
before that, I've been doing interviews a whole year before that, but I just never had the courage to post it, just
Oh
because
wow,
I don't know, just thinking like, oh, what are people gonna think, or like, is my content good enough, or just kind of like second
yeah,
guessing myself and just kind of
Y-
figuring out like, oh, is this something I want to do? Do I want to put myself out there? So I
yeah.
have like a whole, yeah, I have a whole like another, like, what would you call it? Like a whole nother 15 interviews that haven't even aired, that are just
Oh
like
wow,
when I first started, you know what I mean? And so I
holy
don't think those
cow.
would ever air, because even just continuing to interview people, I look at, even at my first interviews that are posted on YouTube, I kind of still cringe, I'm like, ooh, that's kind of, you know what I mean? Just learning how to interview
Yeah,
people, learning how to talk to people. And so imagine the interviews before my first one. And so, yeah, it's just kind of, just kind
dude,
of
I bet they're
crazy. But
stellar.
what is that?
I said I bet they're stellar, man, because I felt the same way. I had a producer on mine, my first like 10 episodes, because exactly what you're saying. Like if I would have listened to them and tried to put them out, it would have never gone out.
Yes, exactly. And so, yeah,
That's-
and just speaking of producers, so it was me and my sister. So my sister is the one, she's like the magic behind everything. She's the one
yeah.
that sets up all my audio, sets up like the lighting, the camera, and then she edits everything after and then throws it up on YouTube. And so
Wow.
all I have to do is just show up and interview the people. And so a lot of the credit has to go to her. And so I appreciate
Yeah.
her for doing that and sticking with me the whole year. She did it the whole year before I even posted anything. And so
Wow.
she's kind of been, the background and the behind the scenes on that, and makes me look good. So, and all the edits and stuff. Yeah, there's a lot of editing that's been, that is done. And so it's kind of
Uh,
the
and
finish
she
and the
and
final product is a lot different than, not a lot different, but for the most part, a little different because of the editing. And so,
right, right. Well, dude, I mean, so what made you want to start it though? I mean, what made
yeah.
you want to
So,
even put it out?
yeah. So just a little background on myself. I was born and raised in Kahuku, Hawaii, in Laie,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
so after I was born and raised in Hawaii, I moved to the mainland, and just being here on the mainland, just looking back at just some of the things that that I was able to be raised around. I kind of like, just that whole the saying, "It takes a village to raise a child," kind of kept coming back to me. And so just from that saying, I was like, man, there's some things that, being born and raised Polynesians, and even the culture in itself, whether it's Tongan, Samoan, for the most part, we're all on the same page with like respect, with
Mm-hmm.
loyalty,
Mm-hmm.
with like respecting your elders and love. And so just kind of those things, I kind of felt like the world needed to hear our stories, because these are some things that we've been born and raised with. But I feel like the world is, depending on your perspective, sometimes the world is trying to grasp at these things or trying to learn, that what we have and what is already innate in us. And yeah, so that's kind of how I started this podcast. And just kind of a background story as well. I after high school, I got a scholarship to play football at New Mexico State University. And
nice.
just being able to play football at New Mexico State University, I was able to, just have my world expanded, being able to live in New Mexico, and then having some of my boys around me. So there were a few of us from Coco that went to New Mexico State. And so just kind of that, being able to explore, and for me, football was my out, like, I'm going to go to the NFL, college was the next step. And then after college, go to the NFL. And so after the whole NFL thing didn't work out, I was, thrown into the real world. And so, learning how to, getting the job 9 to 5, trying to figure out the career and stuff. And so because of that, I was able to just kind of like think about like, I'm sure I'm not the only one that has NFL dreams, but didn't make it to the NFL. And so there are other successful people around me who have, found other ways of being successful, whether in the different industries, there's so many industries that we're in. And so that's what I kind of like looked around and be like, oh, there's this guy making a lot of money in construction, or there's this real estate agent who's making a lot of money, as a Polynesian in real estate, or whatever, the industries and different people that I found that I've interviewed. And a lot of the people that I interview are people that inspire me and that I'm glad that look like me. And so I just kind of thought of the younger generation and, the people that are coming up that are my age. And I feel like when I was younger, it took the village to raise me. And now that I'm a little older, I feel like I'm part of the village that's going to help raise a child. And so it's just kind of a full circle, like trying to do my part or trying to help the younger generation coming up. Not to say that I have a lot of experience or I have lived a lot of life, but just from what I've got to experience, I'm sure there's younger people who are still coming up that can, might benefit from the people that I have on. And so I think that's kind of, sorry, I'm just kind of all over the place with this thing.
Go ahead, dude. Keep going.
It just kind of is, that's kind of like the story behind it. Yeah.
Oh yeah, it was a beautiful story, and especially beautiful because there are a lot of young. So I grew up in Iowa, and I wasn't around a whole lot of Polynesians, but my family is originally from Kapa'a, Kauai. In fact, my mom lives there. My mom lives there right now, but our family goes a long way in Kauai. And when I was growing up, I didn't. I knew that we were Hawaiian, and I grew up in a Polynesian household for sure. But there wasn't a lot of other like Polynesians around me, like my, that like in my high school or anything like that. And so I was drawn to your podcast for that reason. It's like, this is really cool. Like, especially if you're a younger Polynesian, and you're in, you're listening to the Villagemade podcast somewhere in the world where there's not a lot of people, Polynesian people around you. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's very cool. It's very cool. So you start so tell me a little bit more about your story though. So you're in New Mexico State University. Funny enough, like I actually lived in New Mexico for a little bit. NMSU is in Las Cruces.
Las Cruces, yes.
Las Cruces, New Mexico. So I was in like the Farmington, Four Corners area, but so you go to college. I mean, obviously you do very well in college. You come out, the NFL doesn't work out. What's next? I mean, what happens next?
Yeah. So, when I was going to school at New Mexico State University, my projection for the future, or my plan B if the NFL didn't work out, was just move back home to Hawaii and work in the hospitality industry, because that's obviously the number one industry in Hawaii. And so I got my degree in hospitality management with the thought of moving back home to Hawaii. And so after I graduated in 2013 and the whole NFL thing didn't work out, I started, you start looking at rent, you start looking at vehicles, you start looking at, like how to make a payment on cars and stuff. And just the whole market in Hawaii is just so crazy. It's just so expensive. And at that
Mm.
moment, I didn't want to live or move back in with my parents because I experienced like 5 years of freedom, you know what I mean, at New Mexico. And then to
Yeah.
have to go home and live with my parents under their roof again, you know, I was just kind of like,
Yeah, that'd be tough,
I
man. That'd
kind
be
of don't
tough.
want to do that, you know.
Uh-huh.
And so I decided to move to Utah, and that's where I've been since I graduated in 2013. And a lot of my family was already here. My brother was going to Weber State, and then my sister
Okay.
was going here to UVU at the time, and then
Okay.
my grandparents were here as well, my dad's side, and so it was kind of like an easy, you know, choice to come here to Utah because I already had family. And so I moved to Utah
Yeah.
and started working in the hospitality industry, and I started working in hotels.
Oh, that's great, man. That's great, dude. So I've listened to your podcast enough that I kind of want to flip the script.
Yeah.
I want to. Do you have any? But before I do that, though, do you have any more interviews that you're putting out? I mean, I've seen the last few. Are you still
Yeah.
putting them out? Are you still doing it?
Yeah. So at the moment, my sister, she moved to Hawaii. And so she's been in
Oh,
Hawaii
okay.
for a few months now. And so that's why we've been on pause. But
Oh, okay.
she's thinking of moving back. So when she gets back, then we'll probably get back into it. But for the moment,
Well,
yeah,
dude,
that's what's happening.
if you ever need help, just throw them my way, man. I love your stuff, dude. I love your stuff. Like, it's absolutely wonderful. So, let me flip the script though.
Okay.
So Maveuheimuli. So
Yep.
what does your name mean? Who named you? Because I got my name from my tutu. So my middle name was from my great grandma.
Yeah.
But what is your middle name? Or excuse me, what does your name mean? Who gave it to you?
Nice. Yeah. So Maveu is a family name. And according to my so it's my grandpa that named me. Um, it's a family name, and I don't think there's anyone else in the world with the name Maveu because it's a family name. And
Okay.
this family name is my great great grandfather. It was his name, and it never passed down to any of his kids or any of the next generation until I got to myself. And so, yeah, Maveu. There's no meaning to it. It's just just a family name. I
A
don't know
family
where it
name.
came from,
Okay.
but yeah, it's just a family name. And my middle, excuse me, my middle name is Pensimani, which is my grandfather's first name, and so I carry his first name. And then Hemuli, um, technically Hemuli means lost in a foreign land. So we have
Ooh.
some Fijian in our blood, and what the story is of how our last name came to be Hemuli, or lost in a foreign land, is he was a Fijian. He went out to sea. He got lost at sea and found his way in Tonga. And so in Tonga, he became just one of the villagers on the island of Vava'o. And so that's kind of like how I forgot I think his name was Akuila. I forgot what other name he went by, but Akuila was the name that he came from Fiji with. And then once he got to Tonga, then they started calling him Hemuli, which is like, oh, you're just lost, lost in a foreign land. And so that
Yeah.
name just kind of carried on to what we have today. And so yeah, that's
Wow.
kind of the story of my names and where it came from. Yeah.
Wow, dude, that's incredible. Um, yeah, names are very powerful, especially in
I
like
agree.
Polynesian culture. It's a very spiritual thing that happens
Yep.
when you're named. Can you so I understand it, but from your experience, with all the interviews you've done, and I'm sure the knowledge that you have, um, can you tell us like why or like what you think about the whole naming process in the Polynesian culture and like why it's significant?
Yeah. So growing up, it was always my parents and then always my grandparents because my parents live with my grandparents. And so we always heard this phrase, especially growing up, is like, you know, when you're leaving the house, like, remember who you are. Make sure
Yes.
but it was always remember who you are before you left the house. But when you're in the house, it's like, remember whose last name you carry, or remember, don't do anything to, bring shame to our name, or don't do anything that'll, you know, bring like tarnish our name and stuff like
Mhm.
that. And so that kind of always carried with me, when when you go out into the world, when you're leaving the house, anything that you do in
Yeah.
life, you're always representing these people. And then also with the Polynesian culture, or I'm sure it's not only Polynesian culture, but people always say you stand on the shoulders of giants. And so our ancestors who have come before us, they're the shoulders that we stand on. And being able to stand on their shoulders, they did the best they could with what they knew, which is what is like, kind of how we carry our lives. It's like we do the best with what we have. And so my parents, being first generation from the islands, they came to Hawaii from Tonga, and they just did the best they could with what they had. And so I think that's just kind of like carrying on that legacy, right? The legacy of your name, who you represent, just remembering the name that you carry and the shoulders of the giants that you stand on.
Yeah, I think it's a great conversation to have, especially because in my experience, when the names came to us and like the kids, I mean, it took a while. There was a lot of like meditation involved, a lot of thinking involved, prayer involved. And what I've noticed is every time there's a name in my family, it's given for a reason, and you really kind of see that name. Like you really kind of see, like I've seen myself embody the name that I was given at birth.
Exactly.
Like,
yep.
you know what I mean? And not even knowing what it was at birth. Like like we're babies, I didn't even know how to say my middle name because I grew up in the Midwest until, until I was a little bit older, because we just, and I mean, not like super old. I probably knew how to say it by the time I was 8 or 9. And so the fact that like you embody this type of, the meaning of your name, and it kind of carries you through your life, and you look at it and you say it, and there's power in just saying, like, for me, that's my experience. There's been power in saying my Polynesian name, my Hawaiian name. And so it's just been a lot of fun.
Nice.
It's been way fun. So how do you, as a creative, so you do your podcast and then you have a job, like, or is your podcast like your full-time thing?
Sorry, what was that?
Sorry, is the podcast like your full-time gig, or do you have other things going on too?
Yeah, the podcast is just something I do on the side.
Okay,
That's
cool.
something that I enjoy, and that is kind of almost like my my outlet, or kind of like how people have, they go shopping, or some people do, stuff like that. That's kind of like for me. Yeah, I just kind of enjoy having these conversations, and I feel like these conversations, for me, enlighten. Not only am I learning from someone else, but I feel like my spirit has been uplifted as well, and I feel like, it just brings me a lot of joy and a lot of happiness, I guess.
That's right, man. No, podcasting does the same for me. Like, so normally, my podcast, I like to interview creatives. So, people like yourself and like business owners, because it all kind of like stems from this same idea that you brought up earlier that I really enjoy. That's like, you're helping out somebody who doesn't know yet. You know what I'm saying? Like one story, and that's kind of like why I was also drawn to your podcast. So a big thing of that I like to do is story based. So I like a business podcast, but like this one is like a business podcast, but I didn't want to do, like, from the gate, we decided, like, between me and a couple guys I talked with, that it wasn't going to be like a tips and tricks podcast. Like, I didn't want to do anything like that. I wanted like stories. I wanted to hear, you know what I'm saying? Like, I wanted to hear you guys tell me real stories, because like the tips and tricks come, and like inevitably we find out about, what they did and how we can implement it. But like, there's something powerful in the stories that we tell. And that's part of your podcast, right? Like Polynesian, the original storytellers.
Yep.
Yeah. Dude, it's right on point. I mean, in storytelling, like I'm a sales guy, and that's how you sell. That's how you sell really good. It's like you start telling stories.
And just looking back on our culture, it's everything was oral. Nothing was ever written until Christianity came around, and then they started having records. But before that, it was just all storytelling, and I feel like that's why we can connect easier with one another. When we tell these stories, we share our names. We saying things that we say out loud. I feel we there's a connection there because of who we were, you know, as our ancestors, always having, you know, just passing everything on orally. And so I think that
Oh, for sure.
connection is still really strong.
Yeah, and the stories are beautiful and they're beautifully told, and it's powerful to hear them because every, you know, when you hear it from like your grandma or your grandpa, or you know, and you hear it from like people in your culture, like it is very powerful. Like those stories, like even though I didn't really care about some of the ones that I heard at the time, like they really did, like I can reflect on them, you know.
Yep.
And it's a really beautiful thing. But I kind of want to go back to, so you grew up in Hawaii your whole life,
Yep.
and then was the first time coming to the mainland when you went to college in New Mexico?
No. So I
Okay.
had family already here, living here in the mainland, and
Okay.
so I had family in the Bay from my mom's side, and then in Utah on my dad's side. And so we've come every summer, or not every summer, but you know, a lot of.
Yeah.
There's been a few trips before I came out to school.
Yeah. How was your college experience coming to, like, I mean, New Mexico? I mean, when I was there, there wasn't a lot of Polynesians there.
Yeah, for
I mean,
sure.
you know, you found a lot of comfort in some of your brothers who came with you
Yep.
from Kahuku, but what was your experience like coming in and then like living in New Mexico?
Yeah.
I'm
So
curious about that.
when I first so what happened was there was a new coaching staff that came to New Mexico State, and there was a D-line coach that was Samoan, and he wanted a
Oh,
pipeline of
cool.
Polynesians, and so he was the one that kind of recruited us. And so initially there were 4 of us from Koku that went to New Mexico State, and then after that he just kept recruiting every year, 1 or 2 people. And so at one point maybe there was like 15 of us. There was 10 to 15 of us, and so it was a good community there. And
Oh, good.
so my first so I did 2 years before I went up. I went on a church mission, on a LDS
Okay.
mission to Brazil, but I lived in New
Cool.
Mexico. So before I went on my mission in New Mexico, everything was kind of calm in regards
Yeah.
to the cartels. So so we were 20 minutes from the border, and so everything
Yeah.
was kind of calm. So we were able to go into Mexico. We were able, like, we didn't need a passport or anything. We just showed our driver's license, and we could cross the border. So we just go
Okay.
across the border. We just go hang out in Mexico, you know, just go eat lunch there, kind of cruise around, you know. It was kind of cool. We also went to the
Yeah.
temple there in Juarez, which is
Oh,
like
wow.
45 minutes from us.
Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that was like a good time of living there in New Mexico. So living in Las Cruces, though, there's only 3 exits. So you get off the I-10, and there's only 3 exits and so that's as big as Las Cruces went, you know. And so
Yeah. Yeah.
there wasn't really much to do, and so all we just had each other. We just had the boys, you know, and then just went
Yeah.
focused on school and playing football. So going to Mexico was for us like, you know, an outlet, or just kind of able to go explore, you know, and kind of see things. And so that was before my mission. So I went on my mission, came back from the mission, and that's when things got heavy with the cartel. So nobody was able to
Ooh.
cross the borders, and it was just like they told us not to cross, you know, and so we weren't able to go across. And so we just kind of found things to do in Las Cruces, which is not a
Yeah.
lot, but you know, we kind of kept ourselves busy there. But one thing that I really did enjoy there was Mexican food. And so, man, it was just like, you know, growing up in La Ia. So growing up where I grew up, Taco Bell was considered Mexican to me. And so just my surprise when I went to New Mexico and found out there's way more to Mexican food than taco, you know, like the things that we got at Taco Bell. And so
Like
just a
especially
culture
back then,
shock of
like
food.
Mexi Mouse or something like that.
Yeah. And so yeah, it was a cool experience. But so because of the cartel and like just how heavy it got there,
Hmm.
we had to actually go to the temple in Albuquerque, and so that was like a 3-hour drive one way. So it was just like a whole day thing if we wanted to go to the temple, whereas it was just a 45-minute drive to the temple in Juarez. And so yeah,
Mm.
but besides that,
Dang, man.
we just had each other,
Yeah.
and then just learning to love the food and just learning to try the food there. And that's basically how my time in Las Cruces was just food. It was food based around the culture. You know, the Mexican culture are based around
Yeah.
food. And so,
Yeah.
I just really love Mexican food now because of that. And so, there's nothing else to do, you know, like,
Yeah.
there was
No, I
not
mean,
really much. So.
yeah. No, I remember being like, right, you know, even in the kind of the northern part of New Mexico, there wasn't a lot to do there either. It's like New Mexico is just like, you know, and there's like they're farmers or it was mostly like farming and kind of industrial stuff in New Mexico. Yeah, man.
So
Man.
there were a couple of years where we would drive up to Farmington, and that's where we would so before the football season, we'd have like our camp, like a camp. I forgot what it's called, but there was like 2 weeks where we went up to Farmington. We stayed in a hotel and we just practiced at the local football field there before we came back down to start the season in Las Cruces. So I kind of been to Farmington, but not really, because we were only like going to the hotel to the football field, you know. But
Yeah.
I kind of know
crazy,
where it is.
man.
It's in the northern, so.
Right. It's kind of crazy, man. It's kind of crazy, but I do know what you're talking about. I mean, food's a big part of like every culture. Where's your favorite Mexican place to eat?
So in Las Cruces is Andales.
Okay.
They have this green chili like sauce that they do that they put on anything, whatever you want. You can put on enchiladas, you can put on a burrito. Yeah. But so New Mexico, there's this. So just throwing this out there for those who are. But in New Mexico, you have the green chili or red chili. And so that's basically the two chilies that they call it a Christmas tree if you put both chilies on your. So I don't know. What was your favorite? Do you like the green or were you a red person?
I like the green. I remember them cooking green chilies like on the grill, like when we'd go to camp, when we'd go to like barbecues and stuff. They just throw them on the grill, and I really liked. When I was in New Mexico, in fact, it's so funny. I was just talking about this. I'm so glad we're talking about food because it's my favorite, man. And I fell in love with lamb down there. Like they have mutton stew and like mutton, because we were like Farmington there had a big Navajo population, and so like Navajo fry bread, Navajo tacos. We had mutton stew dude, that was my favorite. Like mutton stew is my favorite, and now I eat lamb like wherever I go. It's like my favorite meat. Nice. It's also like some of the most expensive. Like if you want lamb, you got to pay for it, but it's good,
and
dude.
That's almost in Polynesian culture, everything is based around food,
Yeah. I remember bringing. So this was like the other thing I wanted to talk about, because I won't keep you forever, but I love this. I love.
Yeah, I'm enjoying it. So you're good.
So I remember when the first time we had like a white family come to our and I say white, but like you know what I'm talking about. But we had this family come to our Polynesian Thanksgiving, and tell me, like in my Thanksgiving, it was like, I mean, turkey was like the last thing that we cooked. Like, and you know what I'm saying? Yep. We had like prime rib, and we had lobster, and we had ham, and we had all of our oh my gosh, my mom's gonna kick my butt, but we had like wonton and dude, I can't remember. It's tuna and then tomatoes and it's a little thing that we put on, but I can't even remember it now. My mom's gonna kick my butt. But we always had like kimchi and pulled pork and all these like Hawaiian
salmon you're talking about?
Lomi salmon. That's it. Yeah. Lomi salmon. We always had lomi salmon. And by the way, I still make that. And like my wife's family is not Polynesian, and it freaks them out. Like, and when you have a buffet, it's all buffet style, and you just go pick and you eat all day. You know what I'm saying? Yep. Dude. I mean, and that was like, and when they came, they were like, "Dude, what is this? Like, where's the turkey? And like, where's the stuffing?" And I'm like, "We don't eat like that." Like no counter space, man.
Yeah. So it's funny that you brought that up, because going to New Mexico when I was going to school, a lot of the traditions that Americans or like the people on the mainland that they the like the 4th of July or like Thanksgiving or Christmas, like a lot
Yeah.
of the holidays or things that
Yeah.
people observe. I had no idea that there's like tradition for different, like Thanksgiving you have a turkey, Christmas you
Yeah.
have a ham or ham and turkey for both, either Thanksgiving or
Yeah.
Christmas, or like
Yeah.
4th of July you barbecue, and
Yeah.
so growing up in Hawaii, I was like, what is turkey? Just like you said, that's the last thing on the menu. And to me, I always remember Thanksgiving and Christmas with a pig. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, or
Yes.
like barbecue, like at the
Yeah.
beach. And so I was like, when we got here, when I got to New Mexico, and then we had friends invite us over, like who were local from Las Cruces. They invited us over for Thanksgiving dinner. And
Uh-huh.
there was just like, oh, turkey. And I was like, oh, okay. And you just kind of learn about, I mean, obviously you kind of know that turkey is
Yeah.
part of Thanksgiving when you're growing up, because you color Thanksgiving, color turkeys during
Yeah.
Thanksgiving when you're in elementary, but
Right.
you didn't know what it was for until until I moved here. And so it was kind of almost like a culture shock. And
Yeah.
there are some things
Yeah.
that I feel embarrassed that, some stories, but yeah, in regards to food, but it's kind of crazy just because growing up in
Yeah.
Hawaii is just totally different. You don't.
It is. Yeah. It's very different.
Yeah.
We
So
and we have
another
like.
thing,
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
if
Go
you
ahead.
want, I can just share. Like, I
Yeah.
didn't know
Yeah.
what
Go ahead.
eggs. It's kind of embarrassing, but like when they ask you, when we went to IHOP, and they asked me how
Uh-huh.
you want your eggs,
Yes.
and I was like, I
Yeah. I
don't know
know
what
what
that
you.
means. And like when like with our steaks, when we went to a steak
Right.
place, like, how do
Right.
you want your steak? Like, I don't know, like, so it was just kind of
Yeah.
these things that you have to learn on the fly, like, as you get older, you just kind of
Right.
learn. And so, being born and raised in Hawaii, we just
Yeah.
the only eggs I
Kids
knew was scrambled eggs with spam
scrambled
inside.
egg.
And so
Yep.
when they said like, oh, you can have it, like over easy, you can have it sunny side
Sunny
up. I was
side
like, oh,
up.
what is that? Like, and so it's just kind of,
Oh,
growing
that's
pains,
amazing. And
things you
and
got to
yeah,
learn.
and steak is medium rare.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
so I
steak's
didn't know
medium
the
rare.
different cuts of steak. I didn't know there was, I just thought
Oh
everything
yeah.
was like cut up for you. You know what I mean? Like the pulehu ribs or, like the steak and stuff like that. And I was just like, oh, no
Yeah.
idea, man. But you live and
Dude.
you learn,
Yeah, no, I'm with you because I had the opposite. So it was funny. It was the opposite with me and my wife. So I'll never. I always tell the story, and she gets embarrassed. But it's really funny to me because she because I knew my dad was like, I knew this because early in my life, my parents and my grandpa owned a restaurant, a steakhouse,
Nice.
but I'm like you though, like I would never think of ordering a steak like anything other than medium rare because like that's just what we do. That's
Yeah.
how we always ate it. That's just what you do. And I took my wife, she was then my girlfriend, and we went to a steakhouse, and the waiter was like, how do you want your steak? And I'm like, medium rare. And she said that. She was like, what are you talking about? And I was like, okay, well, I'm like, just get what I get. Like, it's medium rare because that's how you eat steak. You don't eat steak well done, then go get a hamburger or something. And they brought the plate out to her, and it was medium rare. And she's like, this
Right.
isn't cooked. And I was like, it is cooked. That's how you eat steak. And yeah, it was a very big culture. Like a very big, that was one of the times that we clashed, like because we were growing up, and food was a big one. Food was a big one. I feel like that's always a big one when you meet new people. You know what I mean? You just like, what are you eating? Or like, why are you eating it like that? Because there's also a way like to eat like in a Polynesian restaurant or something like, you know what I'm saying? Like, how do you eat this? Like, I remember taking some of my friends and we went to a Hawaiian restaurant here in Utah, and I got lau lau. And because I love lau lau, and my friends were like, "What are you eating?" I was like, "They're like, do you eat the whole thing?" And I was like, "Let me show you how to eat this." So they didn't even know how to eat it, and it was it was funny. I mean, it's just cool though because they get to experience new things, and you get to like, take For me, it's like a little bit of pride. Like, hey, let me show you how to eat this.
Yeah, and so. Another thing that we did, because there were a lot of us Polynesians, at one point there was like 15 of us, maybe 10 or 15. So we'd always have these barbecues and just the first time we did the barbecue, like everybody kept coming back because it was the Hawaiian barbecue. You know, we like marinated with shoyu and all that. And everyone was like, "What is this?" You know, because they were just used to, I don't know how they marinate or what they do with their chickens, or but
nothing.
The way that we did it, everybody just kept coming back like, "Hey, when are we gonna have another one?" And so it just kind of like bonded the team even better, even more, because of just being surrounded by food. And so I thought that was cool. But,
good food too.
Sorry, go ahead.
I said good food too, like good food. Hawaiian barbecue, good food. Yeah, go ahead.
Another thing that I wanted to throw out there, you know about Tongans and what we eat.
Yeah.
And so people, you know what I mean? There's a group of there are a group of friends that you just tell people what you do, as Tongans, and there's a group of friends that you don't tell them what you eat, because of a lot of people will look down on you, or you feel judged by them,
I know,
or people are just gonna be like, I'm gonna call Peter, or you know what I mean? Like, is this even, you know what I mean? And so
it was
things like that.
I know exactly what I'll say. If you don't want to say it, I'll say it, because I said it yesterday on a podcast, because I'm pretty sure I know what you're saying. Yeah, I like because so funny story. I'm up in so I claim the Midwest. I claim Iowa is where I grew up because that's where I lived the longest and where I graduated high school. But for a little bit, I lived in Portland, and I played on a Polynesian rugby team, like a club team.
Nice.
And we went to it was like a birthday and a graduation dinner and so and the coach was Tongan, so he invited all of us over. And of course, there's everything, dude, everything. I mean, there was, and horse was one of them. And and I'd eaten it before, so I was like, fine. But there was a couple of guys who were like, "What is this?" And I was like, "It's really good. Just eat it. You're fine, buddy." But yeah, I don't know why some people freak out. I'm like, it's actually really good. You probably wouldn't have a wild horse problem if you just let us eat them.
Yeah, I mean, it is what it is, But
it is what it is.
Part of our that's just what we do, I guess.
Well, it's just, and then I had somebody the other day they're like, "Wow, you really don't have any meat that you wouldn't eat, huh?" Because I was telling this person about lamb, and I was like, horse, I like chicken, I like pork, I like beef. I was like, I like, this is how Polynesian I am. I graduated with my accounting degree, and somebody needed their taxes done, but they couldn't pay me. But he was a farmer, and he was like, "What if I traded you a pig for taxes?" And I was like, "Done."
Right.
Deal. So but it's like, I always have a pig in my fridge, man. That's just what you got to do.
Yeah.
That's just what you got to do.
Cool. If you don't mind, can I ask you, like, what took you around the country so much, or were you in the military family, or?
No. So my grandpa, so my story goes a little bit like, my grandpa is from Kauai. That's the Hawaiian side. So my mom's dad, they're all from Hawaii. So my mom's side's from Hawaii. Papa'a, Kauai. So my grandpa, when he was in college, he had a conversation with his professor that was like, "Hey, if you actually want to do something, you probably shouldn't go to college." And so my grandpa, then he started in the construction industry. So he built a lot of things, and he would just buy he was in real estate and construction, just buy housing and build stuff and go all over the place. And so when my parents met at BYU, my dad was kind of the same thing. He was an oil guy, a truck guy, so a lot in the construction world. And so as Polynesians do, we kind of just moved together as a family. So, they were in New Mexico, so we went to New Mexico, and then and I actually went to Portland because it was after I graduated high school, and I was just living there. My grandparents on my dad's side lived in Portland, but we lived in Missouri. We moved to New Mexico. We lived in Utah. Then we lived in Iowa, and that's kind of where we settled down. When I was about 10, we moved to Iowa, and then I finished and graduated there, and then and then we ended up in Iowa because of my grandpa. So my grandpa helped build the Nauvoo, Illinois temple.
Oh,
and then
okay.
build some other thing. Yeah, build some other things around there. Because when they build temples, you have to be there. There are certain requirements for you to
Yeah.
even be in the construction team, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So he was able to like get a hold of that, and then go out there. And so we landed in Iowa because that was it. And I remember working. I mean, my first jobs were with my grandpa. My mom just sent me off grandpa, and we'd go just do a bunch of work. And then I went on an LDS mission as well. I'm from Iowa, and I went to St. George, Utah, and that was a lot of fun because
Nice.
before, like, I was born in Provo, but I'd never lived in Utah growing up. Like
Okay.
it was like we were born there, and then immediately we were out. And so when I got a call to St. George, it was like I'd never been there, so I was like, this is awesome. And then
Nice.
I served all my time on young single adult campuses, so all college campuses.
Yeah.
For the most part, like 18 months of my mission was college campuses, and it was a blast. We just had fun. So I was like, this is sick.
Yeah.
So
that's cool. So with with this moving around that you've done, being able to explore the world, just especially the country, do you feel like you're like just your whole like perspective on life and just everything was opened up for you, or
man, I
really
realized
like that moving around?
At the time, hindsight's always 2020. At the time, I didn't like it. I thought we were going to stay in New Mexico forever. I was playing Pee Wee football, like Yaffle. It was called, Yaffle football.
Yeah.
And so I thought we were going to stay there forever. We moved to New Mexico from Branson, Missouri, where I thought we were going to, you know what I mean? And so it's just like, we got to get new friends, but we settled down in Iowa, and that was pretty cool. But we also traveled a lot because we had a lot of things that we were, doing. But for the most part, all of my family, like all of my grandpa he had 4 daughters. All of them are in the Midwest. Like they're all pretty close to each other. But I did learn, but looking back, I learned a lot about, people, and like even different cultures, like in the United States, even how different things are, like when you go to the South versus when you go like the Southeast part of the country versus the Southwest part of the country versus the Northwest and the Northeast and the Midwest. It's like everything's so different. And so one of the big lessons I learned was like, yeah, dude, we're just different. And places you never think you'd see people, they're there. And so that's a beautiful thing. One of the beautiful things I love about the Polynesian culture is like we thrive wherever we end up.
Oh yeah.
Like you never think there'd be Polynesians like at Iowa University, but like there's a ton of them, and they're thriving, and they and they're spreading that love, and vice versa. And I mean, that goes with anybody, right? That goes with anybody, but specifically that's what I noticed because I like that. And whenever I heard somebody say, I'm Samoan, I'm Tongan, I'm Hawaiian, I'd be like, hey, what's up, man?
That's the initial reaction. Yep, exactly.
Yeah, because it's just like, I mean, I get that there's sometimes, that there's some feuds every once in a while, but for the most part, we just love each other.
For the most part,
we
just that bond.
Yeah, because the islands really do bring people together.
Yeah.
It's very cool.
Yeah, and just kind of going off of what you're saying, like we thrive wherever we are. But I don't know. I just always take pride too in knowing that our ancestors, were master navigators. Not a lot of people give us credit or give credit to Polynesians for being the best seafarers. Like learning how to travel the world just using the stars and the navigation and without any instruments and stuff like that. But just off of the idea of navigating, we as Polynesians, it's in our DNA, to navigate these wherever we're at in life, even nowadays, we're able to navigate because our ancestors did. And so just like you said, wherever we find ourselves, we're able to navigate these, whatever comes and be able to actually thrive, and so I 100% agree that not only do we just, attach ourselves, but we're also able to thrive. So that's kind of
cool. It is, man. And one of the things that I learned is we carry like we carry like meanings with us, and like symbols are like very important. So like one of the big ones is obviously like the ocean and water, and like
Yep.
how and like land. So like my son's middle name, my son was named by his grandma, and his is like giving, like, or strong as the ocean, giving like the land. But it's like some things that people on the mainland might take for granted, not everybody, but if
Right.
you get kind of caught up in the hustle and bustle of things, and you forget like how, whenever I get by the ocean, I'm like, I feel that, that mana, that like
I
I
agree.
feel, I get that, and I'm like, this is a beautiful place. But then I tell my kids, like whenever we're by the ocean, I'm like, this is beautiful, but remember, like, we have to respect the ocean, because and like, and just like the motherland, and
Yep.
and obviously like I'm LDS, but there's a lot of like these symbolism things and these real things that we're taught as like Polynesians that are like beautiful. Like, the
Yep.
ocean's beautiful, but it's also like you got to respect it, and you got to know things, and the land is the same way. And yeah,
Yep. Yeah,
yeah, man.
that's cool. And every time I go back home to Hawaii, whenever I get to Hawaii, I always kind of feel that buzz. It's kind of like that mana, like your
Yeah,
connection to that land. Just like how you feel that connection to the water, or just
yeah,
these symbols and stuff. You just kind of start getting that buzzing, or you know what I mean. Just kind of can feel it within yourself. So, yeah,
it
I
is.
know what you're talking about.
It is, man. And you just, and I've had friends who aren't part of the culture, who they're like, I love the ocean. I'm like, why do you love the ocean? They're like, I don't know. And I'm like, well, I could probably tell you why. You know what I mean? Because we all come from, like, we have ancestors who had to cross this and who had to learn these lessons. And
Yep.
Polynesians more specifically, but I love it. And you get that there's a reason why it's like the ocean's just beautiful. And like, it's back to your point to navigating. It's true. Like Polynesians, like, that's it, man. Like we know, we just, you feel that, and you have a special connection with that, because that's all we had at one point, was like the ocean and the land,
Yeah.
so
But yeah, not to get too, I guess, LDS, or too Mormon,
go
but
ahead, go ahead, go
just
ahead.
looking at
Oh
like
yeah,
the
okay.
master navigators, because they always looked up, they always looked to the heavens. And so, as Polynesians, we always have that spiritual side to us. And
Hmm.
so no matter where we go in life or what we do, like the different oceans we cross or the different paths that we
Hmm.
take, we always look up to the stars, right? We always look up to the
Hmm.
heavens to guide us. And I feel like
Hmm.
that's where our energy, or our that mana comes from, is from
Hmm.
whoever you believe in, or always coming from the stars or from the heavens. And so I think that's kind of
But it
almost
is, though,
like
but it's
what
true.
carries us. Yeah.
Oh, but it's true. And I have conversations with friends, because I have friends who aren't religious, and they say they're spiritual, whatever that means.
Yeah.
But so we have conversations like that. But I'm like, look, you can call it what you want, but there's something there. We have a guiding force, and
Yeah.
we have this. Our ancestors play a huge part in who we are, and like, and with all of this around us, like this energy that comes from who we are, and our ancestors, and what they've done, and what we'll do, like all of that kind of culminates in the present. And so it's very cool. It's a very cool part,
Yeah. I
and
agree.
that's why I posted it the other day. I was like, I haven't been really like forthcoming, because I don't know if you've seen the post, but I don't look like I'm Hawaiian like that much. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
um but it's a big part of, like, but I'm close enough
Yeah.
in the tree that, like, it's there, and it helps me out a lot in my life, and so it's
Yeah.
wonderful. And so that's what but that is probably the biggest reason. And I was grateful that I had a podcast, because I was like, if I didn't, I wouldn't know how to talk to you. Because like, I love what you're doing. So I hope that everybody tunes in, and gets to know you and all the amazing guests. Man, you had some stellar guests on your podcast. Stellar guests on your
Yeah,
podcast.
man. I just uh and that's another thing too, especially when I'm just scrolling through social media. I always
Uh-huh.
take a note. I'm like, oh, this guy seems interesting, and then I kind of like dive into their story, or kind of like check out what they have
Yeah.
posted and stuff. I'm like, oh, okay, so I should ask them. You know what I mean? And so it's
Yeah.
just kind of just going off of what I normally would be doing, which is scrolling through social media and be like, just taking notes. And like, oh, this guy, seems kind of cool.
You're
And
like, "Hey, cool."
especially Lala, with all his
Oh,
whatever he's posting. I'm like, man, this guy is crazy, or
Lala's
crazy in a
cool.
cool way, not crazy like crazy, But
I follow Lala, and I got my tattoo at Frost City.
oh, nice.
With so my artist was Vili, and I'll actually
Oh
see
yeah,
him again.
yeah.
So I love those guys, man. I love Vili. I love Lala over there. Fred's really cool. I remember the first time I went into the shop with Fred, and I was like, "Hey, dude, I love your stuff." And he's like, "Oh, cool, right on." And he was like, "What are you? Are you like white and Mexican?" I was like, "No." I was like, I'm Hawaiian. He's like, "Oh, okay, my bad." It was cool.
Yeah,
Like Fred's really cool. I love that. I love all those guys over there.
yeah,
But Lala's story was crazy. He had a really cool story.
yeah, man.
He's a cool
His was
dude.
kind of just kind of a kid sent back and forth between Hawaii and Tonga and Utah. So
And all and amazing, dude. Well, hey, brother, I appreciate all your time. I won't keep you forever, but I really appreciate you coming on and taking the time and just and chatting with me, man. I hope that everybody listens to it. So go ahead, tell us where everybody can find your podcast and follow you on social media.
yeah, so on social media, it's just that Villagemade podcast. And then on
Okay.
YouTube, that's where you can find the episodes. And so I think we're about like 30 something, 40 episodes, but
Mm-hmm.
bear with us at the moment. My editor and my everything behind the scenes, she's in Hawaii right now on vacation or taking a few months in Hawaii. But when she gets back, then we'll get back on it. But yeah,
All
man,
right, dude.
our stories, there's endless stories that we have to tell. And so I would, now that, I got to introduce myself to you and you to me, I'll be reaching out to you to get you on the podcast when my sister gets back. I feel like that's a cool story of how, just
Oh yeah.
Iowa, you know what I mean? I think that's the whole thing.
Yeah,
And then
it's
just
very
trying to
straight.
navigate who trying to find out who you are with the Hawaiian and then
Yeah.
the white side. And so that's just basically
Mm-hmm.
what this podcast is about, just finding your identity and,
Yeah, man. Yeah, man. Well, I'll tell you what, dude. In the last 2 weeks, I've learned a lot, and you were a big part of that. So I appreciate you coming on, man. I appreciate you.
No worries, man. Thank you for doing what you do as well. Appreciate the time and all the best. I really do enjoy what you're doing and enjoyed our conversation. So thank you for the time as
Thank
well.
you.